So we had a shooting, another school shooting
Sure.
in Georgia. Two
Yeah.
teachers were killed, two students were killed. Democrats and Republican voters, polls show that they want gun reform if it reduces gun violence. What, if any, gun reform legislation would you support to prevent something like this from happening
Yeah.
again?
Well, I think the important point is it's actually got to work, right? And I think, first of all, our hearts go out to four people who were starting a school year. And as a father of three young kids, it's a terrible tragedy. And you just can't help but feel awful for the kids and the families that are caught up in this stuff, excited about a new school year, cut tragically short. So we got to think about people and actually, offer some condolences and let people know that we're thinking about them and not immediately pivot, I think, to politics because, look, this is complicated. We all want to make sure this stuff happens less frequently. My sense is that the best solution here is not any sort of gun control that's ultimately not going to work here. The solution is we've got to make it harder for these psychos to target our schools, whether they're coming from inside or from outside the school. Our schools, we know, have become soft targets for people who want to make a statement and kill a lot of people, and that means we need more security at our schools. Now, Republicans, at least a few of my friends and colleagues and I have been working on legislation that would do exactly that. But if you pass gun control legislation that doesn't cut down on school shootings, you haven't accomplished anything. If you actually make those schools a little bit safer and beef up the security, I think that has a much greater chance of actually working and making our schools a lot safer.
This school had resource officers who actually stopped the shooter. Clearly it didn't work. He was still able to get in. Do you see any type of gun reform legislation that would help aid if it's a twofold approach?
Well, look, I think the question is not whether a solution is going to be perfect. I think the question is whether a solution cuts down on gun violence in our schools. And I do think that beefing up security, hardening our schools a little bit, is the most evidence-based approach to actually making these schools less vulnerable to school shootings.
What are your thoughts on universal background checks for all guns?
Well, we already have background checks, right? This is one of the issues here, is that when you hear the term universal background checks, we actually do background checks on firearms purchases. The question is, do we need additional background checks, or do we need to fix the background check system that we have? And I think that Republicans, or at least speaking for most Republicans, would say that we need to fix the background check system that we have rather than layer additional regulations on top of it. I mean, look, the fundamental fact here is, look at states that have very strict gun laws. Those states still experience very high levels of school shootings. Look at states that don't have as strict gun laws. Some of those states still have very bad school shootings. I think the evidence suggests that gun reform is actually not the solution here. We have to make the schools more secure.
Trump was on Hannity last night, talked about his immigration border policies, mass deportations, another thing he was hitting.
Yeah.
How does that exactly work? There's 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country right now. How would you enact that proposal of mass deportations? Are we talking about sweeps, raids, putting them on planes, buses? What does that look like?
Well, I think, first of all, we're talking about probably 25 million illegal aliens. I think we radically understated how many illegal aliens are here. And the first thing that we have to do is turn the page on Kamala Harris's failed leadership, right? She's been the border czar for 3.5 years. She's let in probably 10 million illegal aliens and suspended deportations on top of that. That's why we have the crisis that we have. And look, it's affecting Arizonans more than almost anybody. Worse public safety, more fentanyl in our communities. And of course, a lot of young Arizona families can't afford a house because they're competing against illegal aliens, people who shouldn't be here for scarce homes. Now, of course, once you secure the southern border and stop the bleeding, stop the inflow of illegal aliens, you're going to have to figure out what to do with the people here. I think where you focus is you start with the most violent criminals, the people who haven't just broken our border laws, but have also actually committed violent crimes on top of that. Absolutely, you go after those people however you can because we don't want violent felons stalking our communities. And then I think on top of that, you try to make it harder to hire illegal aliens. You try to encourage illegal aliens to go back home. I think if we actually have real border security and combine that with some common sense deportations, we will send a message: America's not open for business for illegal aliens, and that'll solve most of the problem.
I want your quick thoughts on the plan today that Trump announced with the Government Efficiency Commission,
Yeah.
tapping maybe Elon Musk to lead that. Just your initial thoughts, and there are some concerns about how you'll pay for some of your economic policies
Sure.
and raising the fiscal deficit. Do you see this potential commission as funding or offsetting some of those costs?
Well, first of all, I think the most profound thing the president said today is that he actually wants to completely turn the page on a failed consensus in America that we were going to outsource American jobs, support companies that outsourced American jobs, and tax American workers at a higher rate. He's flipping that on its head. He's saying, let's give workers a tax cut. Let's penalize the corporations that are shipping jobs overseas. That's a really significant shift, and I think a great way to lead us into the future with more prosperity and higher take-home pay. Just a really, really important, and I think, frankly, one of the most important ideas to come out of the campaign thus far. you're asking about.
Funding your economic policies. That's always people's concern
Yeah.
about how you pay for it.
So look, I mean, I think that if you look at what we're trying to do, we're trying to make, to your point about Elon Musk, right? We're trying to make the government more efficient. There's so much fraud, there's so much abuse in our system. Some independent analysts say that there are hundreds of billions of dollars a year in fraudulent payouts, either they go into illegal aliens, Social Security and Medicare payments to illegal aliens. We have got to stop that fraud, and part of that is making government more efficient. And if you cut that fraud out, you have more resources to focus on American citizens.
Okay, and the last question for you.
Yeah.
You know, a part of your strategy is hitting Harris on her prior record as senator and
Sure.
as vice president, right?
Yeah.
Flip-flopping, fracking, universal health care, things like that.
Of course.
You've also changed your stances on certain issues. Why is it okay for you to change your stances, but the vice president not?
Well, I think first of all, Kamala Harris has changed her stances on everything, and she's gone 180 degrees opposite, right? It's one thing to say you want to ban fracking, now you don't. You want to open the border, now you don't. You want to defund the police, and now you don't. It's not just one issue where she's changed her mind. She's changed her mind allegedly on every single thing, and she just so happens to have changed her mind in a way that fits with the middle of American politics. I don't think anybody can buy it. Most importantly, if she's actually changed her mind, she should govern like that. If she wants to support American energy, she could do it right now as vice president. If she wants to make it easier to close the border, she should do it right now as vice president. The fact that she's not doing any of the things she says she wants to do suggests to me she doesn't actually believe it. And yeah, I mean, look, one of the things I changed my mind on, for example, is Donald Trump. I think it's okay to change your mind. I didn't support Donald Trump back in 2015. Now, of course, I'm running as his running mate. What changed? First of all, he was a great president. Second of all, I learned that a lot of the things the media said about him were dishonest. But the big difference is if I change my mind on something, I'm going to do interviews and I'm going to talk to the American media about why I changed my mind. She's a person who runs from the American people instead of actually using every opportunity she has to explain what's different, what she wants to do. I think it's actually insulting to the American voters to have a candidate who wants to be their president but is running away from actually talking to them.
What about changing your mind on abortion and the Heritage Foundation, the 2017 project, the report that you wrote the introductory? You changed your mind on those two things. What made you change your mind?
Well, what
distance yourself from Project 2025 and then abortion, the national abortion. What made you change your mind on those things? Distance yourself.
In what way have I changed my mind from what I wrote in 2017?
Distancing yourself from the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 and some of their viewpoints in terms of reproductive access, IVF, abortion.
Well, I haven't had to distance myself from anything. I wrote an introduction to a report back in 2017 that was number one before Project 2025 existed. And we've been very consistent from the very beginning that Project 2025 is its own thing. It has nothing to do with the Trump administration. Now, there are some good ideas in there. There are also some really bad ideas in there. It's a 900-page report. The most important thing is it doesn't speak for the Trump administration or what Donald Trump wants to do in office. That's not changing your mind. That's just clarifying that Kamala Harris, when she says Project 25 is connected to the Trump campaign, that's just a bald-faced lie. It's never been connected. Trump speaks for himself, and he has his own agenda once he wins.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I
man.
appreciate it.